All right. Well, good morning, church. I get to play Oprah's role today. Get to be an interviewer here. I'm so excited. As you know, Pastor Andre already introduced that our theme is all about community at Kettering. And we're blessed with an amazing community. My wife and I have been so excited to be here already for the time that we've been here because of all you wonderful people. And so we get to celebrate that together during this series by hearing stories of our church members. Now, we're surrounded by great members who each have stories of your own. You all have stories that God has led you in your life, and we believe as our pastoral staff that by hearing each other's stories, we can be blessed, we can be encouraged, and we can grow together as a community. So I'm super excited about this, and now just a little bit more about stories. If you've ever read a really good story, or you've ever watched a good story on the screen, you'll realize that great stories are where characters have obstacles, right? They have challenges, and they have to face those challenges and go past them in order for it to be an exciting story. You never watch a movie and think that's or read a book and it's a page turn because someone wakes up in the morning, brushes their teeth, goes to work, goes home, gets ready for bed. It's not an exciting story, right? But in our life sometimes, we kind of avoid some of those obstacles because we'd rather just have like a calm, peaceful life. But today we have a great story to hear because Dr. Peter Boos has a lot of obstacles that he's had to face in his life. And those are the basis of great stories. So thank you for being with us, Peter. So I just wanted to start out by saying, every story has a beginning, right? So tell us more about your beginning.
Well, thank you, Clayton, and pleasure to be here with all of you. I was born in former USSR country to a family of Adventists. My parents were Adventists. My grandparents, I was actually a third-generation Adventist on my dad's side and fourth-generation Adventist on my mom's side. Strange it was, in that part of the world in those days, the Adventist church was not that popular, but that was my privilege, and a lot of obstacles in my parents' and grandparents' life in those days and the strong times of communism. And soon after my parents got married, they also decided to become missionaries. And so they took a project. They moved to a city called Gomel, which is about 150 miles north of Kiev. Unfortunately, probably all familiar with that geography, seeing that terrible maps in the last month or so. But that's kind of where we ended up. And there was something very interesting about that city. It was about 500,000 population, 0 Adventists. As a matter of fact, I think there was really no Protestant faith at all. It was a city with a very strong base of communism. As a matter of fact, the KGB headquarters were in that city, and that's why there was several attempts and very poor outcomes in the past prior to my parents and their attempt to organize a church in that city. So that's kind of where it all began. My father came there looking for a place to rent where they thought could organize a church, and he finally found a really good spot. He thought it was very ideal location near the river, away from the main city, quiet neighborhood. And as he knocked on the door, a lady opens the door, and once she found out what my father was about, she went in to call her husband. As she walked in the house, she found him. He just hung himself in a living room in an attempt to commit suicide. My father, he had a medical education, so he was able to resuscitate him pretty quickly. And turns out this person was one of the prominent KGB agents. As a matter of fact, he was a leader of the KGB headquarters. And as my father saved his life, he repaid him well. That was kind of a foot in the door, so to say, to organize the church in that city. Not only that he first rented the house, later on he sold that place to us, and the house of the KGB officer became the first church, a building where our people were able to meet together, and that's where it all began. That's the city where my parents' ministry and my childhood was spent.
It's amazing. Out of such a crazy beginning, God was able to establish his church. Now, as a young child, you were very young growing up in a communist country. How is that like to be a little child growing in that type of environment?
Yeah, those were the interesting days, I remember as a child, I hated Mondays. Mondays were one of those terrible days for me. I cannot tell you how many times on the way to school I would pray for for some sort of natural disaster to hit, so the school would be canceled, or my teacher to be, you know, hit by a car or whatever. It was just a terrible. And the reason to it is that we had a 6-day school, so that meant that Saturday was a very heavy schooling day. Quizzes and tests were often given out on Saturdays, and you know, I took a step to attend church rather than a school on that day. At first I had excuses. Oh, I wasn't feeling well, that's why I missed the day. Oh, I visited my grandparents, or, you know, my foot was hurt. But after about a month or two, you start running out of those excuses and a pattern becomes very evident. And so I had to admit that actually I was attending church on Saturday. Now, that was a very strange phenomenon to people in that area, because first of all, church, and then on Saturday, that was really a concept of unknown to that community, especially to the administration of the school, so they didn't know how to handle that. You know, variety of techniques were tried, anything from trying to, you know, engage me and kind of rescue me from this cult as they thought it was, then techniques of humiliation and other sorts of things were tried. And so the reason why Mondays were so tough is because when they realized that there was no way that I would break in and come in to school on Saturday, well, the teacher came up with a brilliant idea. She said, well, listen, if you're going to skip school and you want us to tell you what we did on Saturday, why don't you get up here and tell us what you did on Saturday? Well, and as a 7-year-old, that was my first grade, you know, you can imagine getting up in front of the class and it's like, okay, well, you went to church. What did you guys do at church? Well, we sing songs. All right, well, come on, carry on a tune, you know? And to the laughter of everybody else, you're trying to, with, you know, tears in your eyes, try to sing something up there, you know? And then, well, what about the sermon, you know? Tell us what they talk about, you know? And there come some of the stories from the, you know, from the Bible. And again, that was a real reason to laugh for many of them. And it all became known as the Monday morning comedy hour, you know. Other teachers would come in to visit that, and, you know, principals and vice principals. It kind of was somewhat funny. No, it wasn't that funny for me at first. But as time went on, you know, I kind of got into it. You know, at first I was praying for things to be removed out of my way, and for some way God to kind of take away this terrible scenario. But then I knew that it's going to happen. I saw that it wasn't going away, so I started preparing myself, would practice my songs on the way to school, you know, think of a sermon and the stories from the Bible that I could share, you know, with the classmates. And the laughters and the humiliations became kind of less and less. It turned into curiosity. The kids would want to listen to more and more of those stories. And when the teachers realized that it wasn't going the right way, I remember one Monday I came all prepared. And the teacher's like, yeah, today we don't have time. Let's just you know, save that for the next week. Well, next week the same thing. It's like, guys, I got some cool things to share. You know, we had some really fun things we did on Saturday. You know, it's like, we don't have time for today. You know, so next thing so I said, well, guys, you know, if anybody wants to hear, you can just join me on my walk home. I can tell you all the stories. You know, and big crowd of kids would walk with me home. You know, listening to the stories until that had to be put away by teachers, kind of taking another step by basically. Taking by basically telling the students that they could not associate with. Nobody could actually speak or affiliate with me in general because they were afraid that there would be some sort of a brainwashing on my part. So that's kind of how it was, you know. But, you know, I remember one time, you know, Monday, did really good on the test, 100% on the test, right? Nobody else got 100% during that time. And the teacher turned to me and said, Booz, how did you do that? You know, how did you get 100%? Well, I said, God helped me. You know, I was like, wait a minute. How did he help you? Did he like tell you the answers? I mean, if he did, then that's cheating. We can accept it. Okay, so you gotta be clear here. If you did it yourself, we'll count it. If you say God helped you, then this doesn't count. You know, like you get, and situations like this. You know, of course, it is hard not to get bitter when a situation like that happens. You know, and so. Predictions of failure, constant humiliations at the end of the years, you know, these, instead of being a part of the award ceremony, you'll be part of a different group of people who would be shamed and basically chastised for misbehavior or, you know, bad grades. And there was me, you know, for different reasons. Well, the principal and vice principal would often say, look at this fool, you know, He's got all the opportunities and chances, but because of his stupid ideology and his brainwashing, he's not going to get anywhere in life. He's doomed to fail.
Doomed to fail, huh? I just can't get over that. 7-year-old, you're preaching to your teachers and your friends, and you're walking home and being a missionary. That was definitely a twist on what they probably expected from you. So you face these challenges, and maybe now we can chuckle about them because it's kind of funny and it's cute. But like, it wasn't really cute for you back then. It was really difficult. It was one of the big obstacles you faced as a child, and that continued on throughout your childhood. So how did these obstacles shape you and your worldview and your walk with God?
Yeah, at some point I really stopped asking God to remove the obstacles. I kind of realized that they're not going anywhere. I've seen those obstacles in my parents' life. I've seen how things were, and relying on biblical stories, learning about the missionaries such as Joseph, Moses, Daniel, his friends, and kind of trying to associate myself with that group of people, really became my daily sort of life. I stopped praying that God would remove those obstacles. I realized that God did not remove the fiery furnace from Daniel's friend. As a matter of fact, I bet you they prayed, and even they said that God is able to rescue us, but even if it wasn't so, anyways, the fiery furnace happened. They were tied up and thrown in there. What happened instead? God had joined them in that fiery furnace. Instead of taking the furnace away, he took the pain away, he took the shackles away. And this kind of was a real message to me that, listen, it's not about God removing those obstacles. He will be there with you during those obstacles. And that's why we have that story today. If that fiery furnace was removed from Daniel and their friends, we wouldn't have that story today. And that sort of became kind of a theme of my existence. At some point, I even stopped asking God for open doors, until today. I mean, I look for the toughest walls, and I ask God to help me to break through them rather than opening the doors or removing the obstacles. And that sort of became a theme of my life.
Yeah, I like that. Facing obstacles, knowing that he's right beside you, just like he was with all those characters in the Bible. Now, that was your elementary school, kind of high school experience. What was the next step in your life story?
So at the age of 19, my family and I immigrated to Canada. Well, we came first as visitors and realized how wonderful and opportunistic that place was, and I wasn't going to go back. I found myself in the wonderful place called Canadian University College in Alberta, Canada. I'm not sure if any one of you know where that place is. It's really, I think they still have snow there today. But besides that, it was really, really awesome. I still remember the feelings, sitting in a classroom full of students, and we would all sing together. I mean, I would have the flashbacks to the time where I was the one singing, everybody laughing. And now everybody else is singing Christian songs. We had Vespers together, where the whole school comes together and we would sing prayers before class. The class starts. That was absolutely incredible. I truly, truly enjoyed that. It wasn't before long that I had a call into the financial office, and vice president of the finances kind of had to give me a bad news that the year was coming to the end and I still owed money from the previous year, and in order for me to extend it, I needed more money for the next year, so it was about $20,000 short. And it was either that or next year I would have to probably spend time working somewhere on a farm rather than continue with my education. I actually started my theology program there, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed religion and philosophy, and to me that was really a wonderful opportunity. But I started to feel that this was kind of a tough times coming financially. I was not able to take loans, given the visa situation of mine at that time. But it wasn't too long, my dad called me and said, son, I have a wonderful news. We have a person here in Toronto who is a great elderly Adventist, who's a very wealthy man, and he agreed that he's going to help you with your school. He wants you to come over and just spend some time with him before he sponsors your education. So I didn't have much money at that time, but the school actually paid for me to travel to Toronto to meet with this potential future sponsor, and that was incredible. I remember the time we went there, we sat there, we talked, great prayer of dedication, and then he hands me this envelope. I thought that my life was set, and I was fine financially. To my surprise, instead of the needed $20,000, I found in that envelope a $20 bill. which it was pretty interesting conversation when I came back to Canadian University College and told my vice president, who asked me about what's going on with the finances, that his investment of what, $500 they paid for the ticket for me to go there turned only about $20 profit. But it actually opened a whole different opportunity for me. I still think that that was the greatest gift I've ever received. You know, I had to find a way to go through the college education. I could not, there was no way that I would give up at that time. And I remember, you know, the hitchhiking around Canada, trying to find some way to make the $20,000 in that season, because that's what I needed. I had only 4 months to do so, living in the tents. And next thing I knew, I found myself working on a commercial fishing boat over in the Pacific Ocean, out of Port Hardy, Vancouver Island in Canada. So that was an incredible chapter of my life. And you know, that summer, not only I had enough to pay for my debt, I had enough money to buy a car and a cell phone. You know, one of the first person in the college to have a cell phone. So that was another obstacle, that I knew that this was not my own idea. I knew that God was behind it. I knew this was another wall that had to come down. And 4 years later, I graduated from Canadian University College with the theology degree.
Amen. And it's kind of like a story of, you know, you try to cast your net over here, got $20. Jesus said, cast your net in the Pacific Ocean. You're going to get a lot more. And so thankfully he provided
Absolutely.
for you. So now you graduated with theology, you said, but now you're a neurosurgeon, vascular neurosurgeon. So how did God lead you in that direction?
So I was always fascinated with medicine. You know, the ministry of Jesus was very interesting element for me. You know, healing people not only physically but spiritually, and combining those two elements of theology education and medical education seemed to me that was a perfect combination. Now, it was a challenge, you know, somebody who just learned to speak English. Literally 4 years prior to that, I just learned how to say hello in English. And now I'm applying to medical school. That was a wall to navigate through. But thank God there I was. Another great institution that our church has, a wonderful place, Loma Linda University. In 2004, I was a first-year medical student at that university. And what an incredible opportunity, what an incredible time there. You know, that's kind of how my medical journey began. While at the medical school, I couldn't think of anything harder to do than neurosurgery. I couldn't imagine any harder and tougher wall than a neurosurgery. Another obstacle that, with God's help, I was able to get through. Graduated with honors from the neurosurgery department at Loma Linda University, and then went on to Seattle to finish my vascular neurosurgery. And here I am, the best place on earth, Kettering, Ohio.
Amen. Amen.
And, proud to work in the great institution here in Kettering Hospital with my wonderful family, you know, enjoying a great school. It's been a blessing, truly a blessing.
So now, as a vascular neurosurgeon, how do you carry on with your mission today?
So, as you probably all know, the neurosurgery can be a pretty morbid specialty. You know, we deal with a lot of pain and suffering. There's a lot of things that, despite of our best efforts, problems that we cannot solve. Early on in my career, I've learned to deal with this, not by answering the questions, but simply by being there for the patients. This whole theme of Daniel's friends and fiery furnace, I see that furnace burning every day in somebody's lives, you see. People are being thrown into these furnaces left and right, especially in the institution just next door to us, you know. And rather than answering the questions why, I mean, I don't know why certain things happen. There are so many things that I cannot solve, but that's not the point. My mission is just simply being there. Remember how when the 3 friends of Daniel were thrown into the fire, Nebuchadnezzar looks up and says, "Why? Who is that 4th person there? He looks different," right? And that's the kind of a situation where I find myself oftentimes, you know, just being there for the patients. That's our mission as church members, to be there for our community, to, instead of trying to answer why certain things are happening, your presence should alleviate that pain, and that's what I try to focus on. and being that person who others may refer as someone different in that fiery furnace with my patients. And so that's kind of a theme of my practice, being there for the patients, doing my best, what I can do to solve the problem, but most of all, focusing on trying to alleviate that pain rather than removing it entirely.
So now, as you share with us about your life story, I mean, I'm just moved by the success that God has helped you to achieve in your life. But how would you kind of characterize the definition of success for you?
So there's really no one universal definition of success. I think there are many times the success is tied to a power, possession, money, etc. I think I fall back on the definition, on the biblical definition of success. I think, so it's in Matthew 25, verse 21, where Jesus himself defines the success. He tells the story of what it really means to succeed. And when he comes, he describes this whole scenery of the owner coming in and saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful with a little, I will appoint you upon many." And it doesn't take some great accomplishments. It doesn't take a person to be a neurosurgeon to work for God and to do those successful things, to alleviate the pain, to really spread the gospel, to change somebody's life. So to me, success means doing those little things that perhaps will make a big difference for somebody else. And it's not necessarily the title or the number of letters you have behind your name or the career that you may be so proud of. God can use anybody. And looking back at the way that my life was, I oftentimes, talk with my previous classmates, teachers, vice principals, we still communicate. And the things that my life was able to demonstrate to them years down the road, I think this is kind of where it all starts, being faithful in the little things, and that's kind of how God prepares us for the ministry that He has for us.
Thank you so much. And one thing that inspires me about what you're sharing is something I think is applicable for all of us as church members too, because we are facing obstacles every day. Some of us may be having really small obstacles that you're facing today. Some of us have huge life-altering, maybe even soul-searching questions that we're facing at this very moment. And in those moments, I think that's what I find encouraging about your story, is that you talk about this parallel between Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being in a fiery situation, but then looking up and realizing that you're not alone in that situation. Realizing that there's actually, Jesus is right there beside you and is helping you to go through those obstacles. And you've seen that in small ways and in big ways throughout your life. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. So be encouraged, church. I mean, I don't know what obstacles you're facing. There's obstacles I'm facing today too. But in those moments, sometimes I'm tempted to pray, take away the obstacles, Lord, because I don't want to face those. But another view that you've presented today that I find inspiring is to face those obstacles and to look to Jesus for strength to get past those.
Absolutely. And, the beautiful saying goes that there are times some lessons, before they can be understood, they have to be experienced. And this is kind of how, I would encourage parents, I would encourage children, people in our community to really seek that experience. The understanding comes with time. There's a lot of stuff we don't understand. Years down the road we may understand or kind of look back and realize why certain things happen to us. But that's kind of how it is. Some of the lessons, before we can understand them, we ought to experience them. And when you have God on your team, when you are working with God, there's going to be no failure. Down the road, the success is guaranteed.
Amen. I'd like to leave us with just one Bible verse that's one of my favorites. It's found in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9 and 10. And it says, "For he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And I hear Paul's words reflecting on what you just said. He says, all the more I can rejoice in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, because when I'm weak, then I'm strong. So thank you so much, Peter, for sharing your testimony with us.
Thank you.